we could ask, at one moment in our life, like, particularly maybe if it comes to us, the information passing and whatnot, is what was God's intention for the human beings, and what is like the after effect of said quote unquote witchcraft, end quote. Because witchcraft is an act with its own intentions and own, like, practices and components or whatever, but the after effect of that is to, like, go into some field of confusion, some field of not self, some field of forgetfulness, some field of, like, disillusion. And within that, that's the post effect of said quote unquote witchcraft, end quote. And the witchcraft is something you could look at the witchcraft as something of a mental program, and the human being something as some type of, metaphysical hardware already, So, like, if we ask, like, what was God's intention for the humans, I would say to, like, see how, like, spirit could express themselves in new ways, both possibly detrimentally, aside from the good and bad, something that's just a detrimental effect, and then, constructively. And I've been kind of blogging about this for like 6+ years, that kind of notion, respectively. But like we could ask ourselves, like, with new critical thinking, like, why did God make the humans, And it just seems that God made the humans for the simple fact to find new expression and new experimentation. And within that, that's how the spirit is kind of evolving, that's how the spirit is kind of like trekking to find. Because, like, there's also there's a different context of desire where it's just a natural desire to want to progress, rather than the desire to be kind of just solely material. There's a difference between those desires, and to be solely material, or for the desires, or to have desires for solely material things, that could catch us up in the fragments of energies and synergies, and that could cause some type of quote unquote suffering, end quote, because we're catching ourselves within fragmented principles, fragmented actions, and fragmented just fragmented exchanges, and fragmented, like, pretty much intelligence and intentions. And obviously talking about things is not the action of it. Obviously, I had to get that one out there too. So why did God make the humans, for some type of expression simultaneously with some type of experiment? Because not all humans are having some type of progression. There's just a chance. There's just a big esoteric chance. It's like kind of like the luck of the draw of winning some type of, like, esoteric lottery for you to be human. That was some type of, like, supportive assistance, some miscellaneous assistance for us to, like, have the luck of the draw and the assistance to actually attain this format and framework for us to be a human in some type of overall universe, original open source. Because it's like, there is structure in the overall universe, whether we would like to, like, give, neutral credit to that, with its own, like, metaphysical breath of fresh air or whatever. Like, just feeling like the insights working with you, working, like, for you perhaps. And I understand, like, how people could be feeling, because, the empathy, we all have that. That's already been talked about. But that's just kind of I wanted to touch on, like, why did, like, God make humans? If, like, there's gonna be, like, did God know that all this suffering was gonna happen? And if he did, how would he have known? Well, he's in a different realm of time, but we are stuck in time. We're consolidated into some format of time, not good or bad, but it could be. And within that, now we're paying our time. We're paying the quote unquote just the agencies that were, like, not good, not bad, opposed to God, but how it's opposed to God, it could be good or bad, because that's just the polarities within the polarities, right? Because if you're opposed to something, like the sun is opposed to like Saturn in just a different frame, that's not necessarily good or bad. They're just different objects stationed in different energy realms, and they have their own connections to their own realm of layer of what they're ultimately like representing as far as a higher octave constellation and house and whatnot, and how those have different yin and yang, feminine and masculine principles thereof. And the celestial objects are just kind of like the beacons, some type of stationary, metaphysical, macro sigil, the celestial objects, for us to kind of draw upon it. And another point is like, what, like, let's bring some, let me check the time real quick, because I gotta go somewhere. Okay, it's 5:42. I'm good right now. So like when like reflecting on what the predecessors have to say, they're teaching us, they're also learning through their teachings, because what they're teaching and what they're projecting in their balance, they're giving that balance to other people neutrally, from my perspective, and that could reflect to them, like from what we're learning from our teachers. The students could then bring their new revelations to their teachers, and that could be just simple growth and simple new learning. Because when I hear certain predecessors speak, they're speaking about something of like a quote unquote id or an egregor, right? End quote. And look that up. It's just a false identification of something. So the id, so there's different types of ids. There's a false id. There's a quote unquote borrowed id, end quote. Borrowed meaning we're coming from the different challenges and the energies of the celestial objects. So we're working with them. We're starting over in their new challenge. We are of them, So with them and of them, they're two different things. And then the falsification of that. And then the fourth one is we're our own original soul. So that's the four different types of the id, right? It's just false. Somehow it's false. It's lost the insight light, original open source. It's falsehood, and within that falsehood, it's some type of confused dynamic. Just what is confused dynamic? Not knowing necessary intelligence and information that's vital to your well-being, and you have no idea that exists, and you're absent of that. That's the false identity, and the collective consciousness has a false id. So there's a false id. There's a false identification. So within that false identification, we're kind of like going through quote unquote identity crises, end quote, of like, what is really me? I'm not this false id, but I'm still coming out of certain energy challenges in unique ways. And those energy challenges, I'm creating some type of metaphysical character from these challenges on just a matrix level. And aside from that matrix level, excuse me, now there's a genetic level where like in the advanced reincarnation process, I could have been from their genes, So I am some of that, but I am not their shadow. I am not their distortion, But genetically, I am from that, because all is source. We're all, in some twisted irony, we're all like cut from the same fabric, but simultaneously we're not, because there's individuation and differentiation that has its natural opposition from source. So the different types of id is like, there's a false id, just somehow disinformation and confusion energies in your character, false identification of you, the false ID. Then there's the quote unquote borrowed id, where the genetic id, where we are of that, we are of these beings in different ways spiritually. And then there's the id where we're with the challenges, right? We're with those challenges, whether not, just kind of like not necessarily being of them, but just seeing the different framework of how we're with their challenges, regardless if we're connected to them genetically or not. And obviously everything quote unquote connects, end quote, genetically perhaps, end quote. So aside from so there's different types of ids. We're creating a new id from just the challenges of it all, from the falsehood, from the challenges, from the genetics, and then from the forgotten spirituality. So those are the four different types of ids, the identifications, because you'll hear terms like not self, find yourself, like that. Like it's kind of like, no offense, but it's kind of, it lacks substance, Like some of these things, like it's not explaining like anything. It's just saying, like, find yourself. What does that mean? Like that could mean anything, you know. That very example could be used for just some basic commercialism type of shit, because it's just a piece of rhetoric. So without the proper guide, you're not necessarily gonna know what the fuck that means, respectively. And then Moon in Aries conjunct North Node and Mars. So Mars is in the same room as in Rahu. So going towards trying to find our fate, you know, trying to find our future, you know, kind of coasting through confusion and insight, you know, simultaneously. And then we're feeling that, and then we're getting kind of filled from the passion of the Mars, and we're getting filled from North Node future possible like destinies. So we're getting filled, we're kind of feeling ourselves, fulfilling ourselves by what could be, but we can't like over expect shit, because then we'll disappoint ourselves. And that's a traditional one. So we're feeling ourselves from the collective passion, and Mars and Aries, that's just going to put like everyone's going to be where they need to be, you know, because if Mars is at his house, Mars means like, you know, kind of starting war, ending war, pausing war, the whole nine of war. Mars is the ruler of Aries, war. So it's starting war, ending war, pauses of war, you know, maybe that war is old, maybe there's a new war, and we're getting filled by that, you know, whether we kind of like it or not, because there's a certain type of no choice where we're impacted by these energies, and now we're receiving them, and we're emotionally feeling that energy of how to bite through that stuff, you know. And as we're biting through that stuff, now that's aligning with Uranus and Taurus, and Uranus is kind of like, you know, the natural counterbalance to the matrix, respectively. So the natural counterbalance is in like detecting, like, you know, just, you know, pretty much low key, like the fake stuff, pretty much. And within that fake stuff, Uranus and Taurus is going to bring accuracy to all of this. Thank you. Have the best life ever.